When people think back to classic 90s sitcoms, Family Matters always comes to mind. The wholesome stories, family lessons, and comedic charm of the Winslow household kept millions of viewers tuning in week after week. But more than anything, one character stole the spotlight and became a cultural phenomenon: Steve Urkel. With his oversized glasses, squeaky voice, suspenders, and unforgettable catchphrases like, "Did I do that?" Urkel became one of the most recognizable TV characters of all time. But here's the twist. Steve Urkel wasn't even supposed to be part of the show in the way fans remember him. He was introduced in season 1 as a one-off guest star, but his quirky personality won over audiences so quickly that producers had no choice but to bring him back. Soon, Jaleel White, the young actor behind the character, went from being a relative unknown to one of the most famous TV stars in America. While this success might sound like every actor's dream, the story behind Jaleel White's rise to fame and what followed is much more complicated. Fame came at a heavy price, and the truth of what he endured on and after Family Matters is both heartbreaking and eye-opening. Jaleel White was just 12 years old when he landed the role of Steve Urkel in 1989. Originally, the character was only written to appear in a single episode, but his comedic timing and undeniable charm were so magnetic that the audience couldn't get enough. Before long, the show, which was initially centered around the Winslow family, started revolving around Urkel's antics. It was a blessing and a curse. On one hand, Jaleel became a household name almost overnight. He was on magazine covers, appearing on late-night talk shows, and even had toys, lunchboxes, and dolls modeled after him. Urkelmania swept the nation, and for a while, it seemed like Jaleel White had everything a young actor could ask for. But behind the glasses and suspenders, Jaleel struggled with the weight of being typecast and the pressures of carrying an entire show on his shoulders. For fans, Family Matters was a lighthearted show about family and love. But for Jaleel, playing Urkel was more than just a job. It became a cage. Cast members have admitted in interviews that while they appreciated what Urkel brought to the show, they sometimes resented how the character took over the series. Originally, Family Matters was supposed to be about the Winslows, a middle-class black family navigating everyday life in Chicago. With Urkel's rise, however, the family's storylines often took a backseat. Some cast members, including Jo Marie Payton, who played Harriet Winslow, reportedly clashed with producers about how much screen time Urkel was getting. This tension created an environment where Jaleel often felt isolated, even though he was the star. Worse still, Jaleel was just a kid. While his friends were living normal teenage lives, he was working long hours, memorizing scripts, and carrying the responsibility of keeping the show alive. For many child stars, this level of pressure is overwhelming, and Jaleel was no exception. The biggest challenge for Jaleel White was that Steve Urkel completely overshadowed his real identity. Audiences didn't see Jaleel, they only saw Urkel. Teachers, fans, and even strangers on the street would call him Urkel, not realizing how much it hurt. Jaleel himself once admitted in interviews that he sometimes hated the character because it robbed him of a normal life. Imagine being a teenager, trying to figure out who you are, but the world only sees you as a clumsy, nerdy caricature. For Jaleel, the suspenders and glasses became a costume he couldn't take off, even when the cameras weren't rolling. That loss of self-identity is something he carried with him for years. By the mid-1990s, Family Matters was one of the most popular sitcoms on TV. Steve Urkel had become a cultural icon, appearing in crossovers with other shows like Full House and even earning his own line of cereal, Urkel OS. But by the late 90s, audiences began to grow tired of the same gags and catchphrases. Even though Urkel had many alter egos like the suave Stephen Urkel, ratings started to dip. In 1997, ABC canceled the show, and CBS picked it up for one final season. Unfortunately, the move didn't save it. Family Matters ended in 1998 after 9 seasons. For most of the cast, this was the end of an era. But for Jaleel White, it was something else entirely, the start of a personal battle that would define the rest of his career. When Family Matters ended, Jaleel faced the harsh reality of Hollywood. Casting directors didn't want Jaleel White, the versatile actor. They only saw Steve Urkel. He tried auditioning for different roles, but time and again, he was rejected because he was too recognizable. Jaleel was heartbroken. While other actors from his era were moving into film or landing new shows, he was trapped in the shadow of his own creation. The very role that had made him a star now made it almost impossible to move forward. In later interviews, Jaleel described this period as one of the darkest times of his life. He admitted to battling depression and feeling lost about his place in the industry. At one point, he even said that Urkel haunted him because no matter how much he tried, people couldn't separate the character from the man. Though the road was rough, Jaleel did find occasional success. Still, he never managed to fully escape Urkel's shadow. And that's where the heartbreak lies. Jaleel White had the talent, the charisma, and the potential to become so much more, but Hollywood couldn't see past the suspenders and catchphrases. To the outside world, Jaleel White seemed like the lucky kid who struck gold with an unforgettable role. But behind the laughter and catchphrases was a boy who grew up feeling trapped, isolated, and overshadowed by the very character that made him famous. And while Jaleel has found ways to push forward, the emotional scars from those years remain. What happened to him after Family Matters isn't just the story of one actor, it's the cautionary tale of what fame can do to a young life. But that's only half the story. Because in the years after Family Matters, Jaleel White's life would take even more unexpected turns, from personal struggles to surprising comebacks. And what he revealed later about his time on the show truly shocked fans who thought they knew everything. As Urkel's popularity skyrocketed, the show's focus shifted almost entirely to Jaleel White. To fans, it seemed like a natural move. Urkel was funny, quirky, and endlessly marketable. But for other cast members, the change felt like a betrayal. Jo Marie Payton, who played Harriet Winslow, was especially vocal about her frustrations. In interviews years later, she admitted she was unhappy with how the family-centered themes of the show were replaced with outrageous Urkel-centered plots. At one point, she even considered walking off set. Rumors swirled that she and Jaleel had heated disagreements, with Payton feeling that the young star's growing influence was changing the show's direction for the worse. For Jaleel, these tensions created a lonely atmosphere. He was a teenager navigating fame, but he was also dealing with adult-level conflicts in the workplace. Being at the center of the show may have made him famous, but it also put a target on his back. Unlike many child actors, Jaleel White didn't come from Hollywood royalty or have industry connections. He was a regular kid thrown into extraordinary circumstances. That made the pressures of fame even harder to handle. Behind closed doors, Jaleel later admitted that he often felt like he was walking on eggshells. Every move he made was scrutinized by producers, by the press, and even by his peers. And while fans loved Urkel, Jaleel had to deal with the painful truth that people weren't really laughing with him. They were laughing at the caricature he was forced to embody. As he grew older, this pressure began to weigh heavily on him. He revealed years later that the lack of support and guidance during those years left scars that he still carries. Unlike his peers in the entertainment industry who could take breaks between projects, Jaleel was locked into Urkel for nearly a decade. After Family Matters ended, Jaleel's struggles only deepened. On the surface, it looked like he could simply transition to new roles. But casting directors weren't interested. They couldn't separate Jaleel White, the actor, from Steve Urkel, the character. This rejection cut deep. Jaleel later admitted he felt punished by Hollywood for doing his job too well. The more he tried to reinvent himself, the more he was dragged back into Urkel's shadow. Adding to this heartbreak were the tabloid headlines. In 2012, his personal life was thrust into the spotlight when his ex-girlfriend accused him of abusive behavior. Though Jaleel denied the allegations, the scandal took a toll on his public image. Suddenly, the goofy, lovable Urkel fans remembered was replaced by darker stories that overshadowed his efforts to rebuild his career. Still, Jaleel White never gave up on Hollywood. Determined to prove he was more than Urkel, he started exploring different avenues. He took on guest roles in series like House, Castle, and Psych. He also appeared in independent films where he could play characters far removed from the nerdy image fans associated with him. In 2010, Jaleel tried his hand at producing, creating, and starring in a web series called Fake It Till You Make It. It was a bold move meant to showcase his versatility and creativity outside of acting. While the project didn't launch him back into stardom, it showed his resilience and desire to carve out a new space for himself. He also competed on Dancing with the Stars in 2012, where fans saw a different side of him. For a brief moment, it looked like he might finally break free from the Urkel stereotype. But despite positive buzz, Hollywood still wasn't ready to fully embrace Jaleel White as anything but the kid in suspenders. In later interviews, Jaleel opened up about the emotional toll of his career. He admitted that being Urkel left him both grateful and resentful. On one hand, the role made him a star. On the other, it limited every opportunity afterward. He also revealed the loneliness of his childhood. While most kids his age were hanging out with friends, he was working 12-hour days on set. That lost sense of normalcy haunted him into adulthood. Jaleel has spoken about breaking down in tears during the Dancing with the Stars run because the pressure and memories of his child star days came rushing back. It was a raw reminder of how deeply the role of Urkel had affected his mental health. Despite the setbacks, Jaleel White has worked hard to find balance in his life. He became a father in 2009, and his daughter Samaya has been a source of joy and grounding for him. In interviews, he has said that fatherhood gave him perspective and helped him focus on what truly matters beyond fame. In recent years, Jaleel has leaned into his legacy with more acceptance. He's appeared in nostalgic specials, documentaries about 90s TV, and even reprised Urkel in animated form for a Scooby-Doo crossover in 2019. Rather than running from the character, he's slowly learning to embrace it as part of his journey, though it took decades of pain to get there. The story of Jaleel White isn't just about one actor's struggles. It's about the dangers of fame, the weight of being a child star, and the heartbreak of being trapped by a role that was never supposed to define you. For fans, Steve Urkel will always bring laughter and nostalgia. But for Jaleel White, the suspenders, glasses, and squeaky voice represent both his greatest achievement and his deepest wound. Today, he's still fighting to prove himself on his own terms. And while he may never fully escape Urkel, his resilience and honesty about his struggles have earned him respect in ways that fame alone never could.